Professor Eidelman, who spoke before, who spoke earlier, Dr. Osnat Levtzion-Korach, CEO of Asafa Ophir Medical Center. Please join us. Welcome with an applaud, please. Professor Rafael Beyar, Director of Rambam Healthcare Campus, and Professor Itamar Grotto, Associate Director General of the Israeli Ministry of Health and in charge of cybersecurity in the healthcare sector. Good morning, everyone. So I would like to kick off this discussion with a little bit about risks. I know we touched, or we covered risks quite significantly or in detail, but nevertheless, I would like to ask you, maybe Professor Beyar, if we'll start with you, what are the risks for a hospital administrator, hospital manager that keeps you awake at nights? Yeah. Let's see.
Well, there are many risks that wake at night. Cyber has not been one of these so far, I can tell you. And I'll tell you another thing. Cyber did not kill yet patients. I mean, we heard about hackers, about killing hundreds of patients, but at least biological parts, the human parts, have been much more, until now, forceful than cyber in harming patients. Cyber is a risk for sure, but I'll give you an example. I mean, missiles in Hezbollah has also been a risk in the north for Israel. Until 2006 war, where 100 missiles fell around our hospitals and people were injured, we didn't think of building an underground hospital and putting $120 million into that. Cyber, going to that, the risk is also there. We heard all the stories. I won't repeat them. I mean, the risk is huge. The risk is potential. But the actual risk has been, and the fears that we have are, first of all, obviously we're all dependent on our IT for operation of the hospital, whether it's operational, whether it's clinical, whether it's using all types of things in IT to manage a hospital. But so our biggest, immediate risk which happened has been shutdown of the IT operational, and then you have to convert to manual. That's a risk. It happened. I mean, sometimes we had like a 8 to 12 hours stall. I mean, the computer system was stalled, whether it's hacker or just technical problems. And then the ER cannot release patients. You can't get access to exams. Everything stalls. Ambulances come into the hospital. They don't have beds even to deploy the hospital, and there are risks to the hospital. So IT is an immediate risk. The threat is there. The practical threat has happened in very minor scale to what it could happen until now, I think. Why, I don't know. But for sure, the future is much more riskier than the present and the past, because more and more we depend on the IT systems. More and more.
Thank you very much. I'm intrigued to ask you a question, the panel, a question about the health sector as a whole and what should keep us at night in terms of failure at the health sector level. Anyone wants a comment on that, or should we move on?
Just in general terms, just would like to divide the threats into two major groups. One of them is, we can call active or clear or open attack, which means that we already identify the attack the minute it happens, or the minute the attacker is starting to attack. This is mainly a denial of service, and we realize that something is wrong, and compare it to silent, which can be going on for a longer time, and then maybe change results of laboratory results or patients' data, and this is maybe sometimes can be difficult. So I think we should start the discussion from these two division between these 2 points. Of course, there are a lot of specific threats that can be identified, but maybe we can divide it into 5 categories. One of them is the denial of service. This is the first one, when the system is shut down. Then we can relate to the medical devices, or changes in medical devices or laboratory devices. Then, of course, the privacy issue and going into the files. Then the exposure of intellectual property and patents and things like that. And then the 5th one is embezzlement and fraud. So this is how I would put it into categories.
Thanks very much. Professor Eidelman, you wanted to...
Yeah, just a couple of words. It's a good question about the risk, because it's also the importance of this meeting to stress the risk, because on an everyday basis we take care of urgent situations when there is a need for somebody from above to look about strategy. And the system works starting from politicians the way that no one gets credit for preventing catastrophe. There is no politician that gets credit for preventing catastrophe. When catastrophe happens, he gets credit when he brings a solution. A kind of huge plane supertanker to take care of the catastrophe. That's the way the system works. So we should understand that, and to find the way to plan strategically what should be done to prevent this real risk.
Thank you very much. So,
add a few things.
Yes, please.
And first of all, after your amazing lecture, it's very scary, and I think that, we just might as well just give up everything, because we're doing so much. We feel that we're more secure than Iran, but now we see that Iran is not that secure either. But and then you say you can just come in and fool around with everything. But actually, it has gotten much. I think a lot of work is being done, a lot of money is put in. And actually, we had a drill a few months ago, exactly of attacking our hospital. And of course, we were well prepared, but still, and some of the manipulation. So it was also data privacy. The other thing is manipulation with data. And if you do it one by one, you just change the values at the lab. Potassium, for example, was changed. So all of a sudden, you go into this record of this old lady, and all of a sudden she has hypokalemia, means that she has a low potassium. You give her potassium, and you killed her because she didn't really have hypokalemia. And as Professor Beyar said, probably you wouldn't even know that she died because of it, because she was old and she was sick. That's why she was in the hospital. Now, that way you can manipulate data in many places. You can manipulate the ventilators. You can just change the values of the ventilator. I'm just giving you some ideas in other hospitals, not in mine. But so you do it you can change values. And then the other thing is, of course, the hardware itself, where the monitors won't work. And as long as we go more and more and more IT, and I totally agree with you, we're not, only after this drill, I really understood, and apparently not even enough, how dangerous the whole thing is.
So let me just interrupt you for a second. I would like to ask you, based on your comments and also the comments made before, how probable is it that a hospital, having sustained a breach, would be able to operate without IT or without computers, with manual processes, as maybe was done in the past?
Well, currently, it's almost impossible, but some things are impossible. If, for example, we take the chart, the medical charts, that's the easy one, right? Okay, so you just switch to papers. So we always have the ability to take the last sheet of orders so you can see what the last doctor orders were. So you won't have all the medication get lost. That's it. Okay, so you have the medications, you write on paper. But then what about the labs? Everything is automated. What about even the pneumatic system that takes the tubes around the hospital? All the ventilators, all the monitors, everything now is digital. And if you want, depends how bad the attack is. But in many instances, you just cannot work.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll just add on that.
Yes, please.
Although, I mean, obviously, it's very complicated now to run a hospital without information system. We do have a plan to go manual. So practically, if things shut down, we can go manual. Obviously, it's going to be much less efficient. You will have less data available, but it's the same thing as you meet a patient on the street. You have to treat them. You treat them with the current knowledge that you have. But there is a back plan with printed materials, with protected, stored computers that are on the second and third level. There's a written plan, and we have that plan online. So we are thinking of these conditions on a regular basis.
Yeah, but for this situation, you should know that something happened. The biggest problem is if things happen without any awareness.
It's only when you identify.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've been, by the way, running some management drills for some hospitals. We at BDO, and we got the perception that the medical professions, let's say, from that has the experience of the past working manually, are more confident than the younger generation. Just a comment. Professor Grotto, I know that you wanted to also add something, but let me just also ask you, relating to this whole discussion about the medical professions within hospitals, and in light of a situation where medical data is poisoned over time, which is a threat that the financial services sector, for instance, is very, very worried about, because their labor is not accustomed to looking critically at the data that information systems provide to them. And I would like to ask you, do you think, and actually all of you, do you think that the medical professions within the hospital are critically looking at data coming out of IT systems, or are they relying on the data? So Professor Grotto, your comment, and then answer, please.
Two comments. One, of course, this is not. There is a lot of debate among the medical community and also managers and directors of hospitals whether such an attack will, let's say, will stop the hospital from working, or the other answer is the hospital can accommodate and move to manual, as Professor Beyar said. I think, of course, this is not a black and white question. What I believe is that. And we should plan for this, is that the hospital will be able to provide less sophisticated services. So the services will be less than we can give, and which means that maybe like in the third world country, yes. So this is and this of course will lead to some can lead to also loss of life. So this is the comment. As for the issue of the alert, I think, first of all, we should look, and we are trying to also to identify, maybe using algorithm or machine learning that could identify an event that is not something that is going on irregular. For example, we have in all the hospitals, we have what we call the panic values, which are, values which the laboratory has to call the physician and say, hey, you have a problem, you have to do something with it. So if we see, for example, an increase in the level of the panic values, then something is happening. So I think some of the solutions should be automatic. I believe that most of the physicians, and this is from discussion that we are having with managers as well as the physician on the working level, that they will identify if something is going on in a systematic way. But this have still yet to be proved, and we should also test it with drills. We are working now with, let's say, kind of a think tank with people from the health sector to try and identify where are the risks that we cannot maybe find, or which are not be identified by the physicians. Another thing that we are talking a lot about hospitals, we also have to look at the community, because the community, of course, is also important. Maybe it's not so urgent, but if the community loses its ability to access the medical records for a long period, then this is, of course, a problem also for the patients and the providers.
Thanks very much. Dr. Levtzion-Korach, did you want to add something?
You asked a great question, whether the physicians and the staff will notice. So it depends. If it goes under the radar and it's not at the extremities, we will notice right away. But if it's not, and if I gave the example for the potassium before, it shouldn't. You don't take it if you want to do the hacking. You don't take it to the extreme. You just change it a bit, so it will be still within the ranges of the normal values. And for that, if it's in the normal values, it will take more time. We do have regular checkups and quality checkups that are supposed to run and check it themselves all the time. But again, if it's under the radar, then it will take us obviously more time to notice it.
Well, let's not forget that after all, every time a patient is treated by a doctor, he has multiple data that he gets absorbed all the time throughout throughout the length of stay of the hospital, and he should be trained if there is a result which looks awkward, doesn't look. So we try to teach him all the time. I mean, you have to suspect everything. There are errors. There can be hacking. And it can be just missing some information. Most of the errors that we have found are not due to hacking, it's due to human factor. That's the major thing. This is my major concern. And that's where we get all these lawsuits and everything. It's never been in the last 10 years that I'm director due to hacking. All the millions and tens of millions of dollars that we pay for mistakes that have happened are human errors.
Thank you. I think that this relates to the nature of attacks on healthcare over the last, let's say, 10, 15 years, and gradually becoming more and more serious over the last 5 or 6 years. But looking into the future, this might change. I wanted to move on to the regulatory landscape and maybe start with a problematic area. Which involves medical devices. In medical devices, so it seems, I had the privilege to speak at a Medical Devices Global Conference last year, and I was the only speaker talking about cybersecurity, and the reason I was there was because I asked the organizers, how can you have a medical devices conference without cybersecurity? So they asked me to come and speak about it. So I'm asking you, do you think, and Ilan was talking about vulnerabilities, and it's quite apparent that that the R&D companies, as Dr. Matania mentioned as well, are not really looking at that as a critical area of a challenge for them. So I would like to ask you, maybe starting with you, Professor Eidelman, do you think there's space for global sort of regulation or standardization and local regulation to secure medical devices?
I am very skeptical that at this stage we can reach situation of global regulation. The medical system works like some centers, like FDA in the United States, is doing some work on this field, and then others learn from it. You know, why FDA? Because FDA is a narrative about stopping bad drugs, like it was in thalidomide, the only drugs that was used in Europe with severe consequences and wasn't allowed in the States. So I'm not sure that we are ready for global regulation. But I believe that with more and more attacks, first of all, politicians will understand that it's a very important area, and then all the authorities will start moving in this direction. Thank you.
So, Professor Eidelman, I think that you have hinted more than once that Ilan and his team are required to create some catastrophe so that people would understand, huh?
Unfortunately, that's the way the system works.
Any additional comments around the medical devices? Is Professor Grotto?
I agree that this is, let's say, a very good point of entry if someone wants to attack the hospitals. And of course, we should do, first of all, try to do something locally. We, the Minister of Health, want to put new regulations. The problem is that we don't have a medical devices law yet in Israel, so this is something that, while it will get into act and will be active, then we will be able to add the new regulations to this law. Second thing is that we maybe should also mention that many of the computers and the computer systems and the operating system is in the health sector are old. Still, some of them use, including in the medical device sector, use Windows XP and servers of Outlook 2003 and things like that. So this is something that should also, and I issued a regulation regarding it, but I've been confronted by the hospitals and the HMOs that they cannot do it because they need, okay, now give me the money if you do the regulation. So this is kind of a difficult situation that if you compare, for example, to the FDA, where the FDA can issue regulations and then it doesn't take care of the money. But here in Israel, it's a little bit difficult. So if you take a regulation that costs the money to organization, then you have to assist them in some way.
Thank you. Professor Beyar?
Well, I think that it's a very interesting thing what will happen with medical device. Many of the medical devices today are becoming more and more connected to the internet. Now you can differentiate between devices that can harm a patient or devices, you can, if you take an insulin pump or a pacemaker, you can kill a patient with hacking that. On the other, or even with failure modes. On the other side, if devices are only transmitting information, then, it's less of a risk to the patient, although it's also. I think that the FDA, I know, is now starting to think about what type of control should be put on the manufacturing of medical devices. And I think now it's in the process of thinking, and I'm sure in the next few years we're going to see more and more regulations there. We need to do regulations, and the same, it depends on the risk. After all, regulation is to protect the patients from risks. And if there are significant risks, it's our role, the regulators, to control that risk.
Thank you very much. So, if we need to address the healthcare challenges from a broad perspective, having discussed regulation on medical devices, what do you think should be the government's responsibility or involvement in improving cybersecurity in the healthcare sector? So that's, I would say, a discussion about what could be potential solutions. Maybe we'll start with Professor Grotto.
Yes. So I will try to start and see what's I see the role of the government, the role of the Ministry of Health. It's not only the Ministry of Health. It's of course we don't work alone. And for example, if you relate to the questions of let's say what we call the structure or the
Essential.
Critical structure, then of course it's not a decision of the Ministry of Health alone. I believe that we should relate to the system as critical, but the definition of critical system in Israel is a little bit different. It has some implications that are not similar worldwide, but of course we have to invest in it, and we have to start with leadership. I think the Minister of Health should lead the system and also guide and regulate. This is why in the Minister of Health there is a special unit or cybersecurity unit which is reporting directly to me as the Associate Director General and not to the IT. It's not. It's work very closely with the IT unit, but it's not regarded as part of the IT unit. I think we should be involved in what's happening in the health system. This includes, I think, we have two main roles. One of them is to give them some kind of a central defense that can be supplied to, and we would like to identify where are the central points that we can give a central defense, and then we have to push them also to invest their own resources on top of this central defense. Of course, we recognize it's not only IT, and that this is why many people are involved, and we also work on a business plan and business continuity plan that should be operating, and this is why the emergency division is also involved. I must say that, and add to what Professor Eidelman said about regarding that people or the politicians or decision makers, sometimes they don't want to invest in something that will happen, and this is the issue of prevention. It's not only on that field, but here we have something also specific to the health sector. That's in any way if we are in the position of policy decision, then a lot of our decisions are affecting the lives of people. For example, we don't invest enough in prevention infections in hospitals, so many people die of this. So the issue of the life and death, it's not something it's only for cyber. So this is why we have to maybe work very hard on this issue and see how to differentiate it from other risks. Sometimes it's combined with other risks because the business continuity plan is not only for cyber. It could be also to war and other things. But we have to see how we differentiate this risk from others, and this is, I think, one of the main challenges that we have.
Thank you. Any other comments around government support from a hospital's perspective? And
well, I think that I'm talking about government support, at least government governance. Obviously, we have to understand there is infrastructure, there are protecting systems that you have to purchase and buy them. There's the human factor and there's education of the staff. And I think that you have to account for all of them. You have to educate the people. Like, for example, we are on a regular basis, we have sent, some emails which are by definition suspicious, so that get people to know how to detect them and report to the IT team or that in charge of security. And I agree with what Professor Gamzu said before, that the one that is in charge of security should report to the CEO. It may be it's going to be completely impossible for him to work independently of the IT team because of professionalism and the integration that you need to actually combine it with the system. But he has to report directly, not through the IT person, but also to one of the governance functions of the hospital. So these are things that I wanted to add.
Thank you. Professor Eidelman, maybe from a more global perspective, what is the medical profession expecting from governments or ministries of health in general to improve cybersecurity in respective countries?
First of all, what is important is to increase the awareness, and I believe that the solution of technological problem lies in technology, and we should raise an awareness in order to cause the governments to invest into technological solutions. And definitely there is a need in education and cultural changes, and still we believe that technological solution is something that we are waiting for, but we stress all the way, as I mentioned before, that patient privacy, patient data should be available only when a patient is under treatment. And it's a long way to go.
Thank you very much. So, in your best judgment, what is the Israeli healthcare maturity level in terms of cybersecurity as of now?
I think hearing Ilan before, you heard it's not very mature. But and I think
that's 5 years ago.
Yeah. And now everything is all kept. You can't do, you can't attack, you can't do anything. Well, I think that the last few years there's a huge improvement in the awareness, in the work, and the money that is invested in it. To tell you where we are, I think we're in a much better place. I'm sure that there are still many holes and that people can go into, and as we know, hacking became one of the terror events, and it can be a disaster. And as always, prevention is much cheaper than fixing it later. The awareness and all that is growing. I think we still have a lot of work to do, and I can tell that I am personally taking some take-home messages from today as well.
Thank you, Dr. Levtzion-Korach. Please, Professor Beyar.
Well, I think I agree with Osnat that we are at the beginning of the process. I think, but if we compare ourselves to the world, I think we are more secure than most of the hospitals I know in the world even. The system, I can tell you when there was a hacking episode a year ago, I think, we were able to detect that in advance, and many of our hospitals did not undergo any serious damage or anything like that. So, but there's still way to go. I think the whole field is in its infancy in the world, and I think it will grow and become much more secure. The thing that we have to make sure is that with over-security, that we don't lose our freedom to operate and do things which are flexible. For example, we've seen sometimes overreaction to this security, and research is actually affected in a negative way. It takes a long time to approve a research. Questions which are raised sometimes, which are sometimes just out of fear, limit research. We have to make sure not to push the limit to the other side.
As well as processes, everyday processes, even access to emails, access to packs, to examinations, that you need to work in order to be able to give the better care to the patients.
I would like to start with a little story that how the global cyber attacks has had an effect on the decision making in the Ministry of Health. Once last year we wanted to include a new vaccine, a new updated vaccine to prevent the human papilloma virus, the HPV, which is produced by Merck company. This was about the the basket committee of the Minister of Health was about to make a decision regarding, and then suddenly, because of the attack, I think it was because of the NotPetya, they had an attack on Merck, and they told us that they will not be able to supply the vaccine for the next year, which means that this new vaccine was not could not enter the system. This could happen. This was a new vaccine, and so we used the old vaccine. But it could happen to many other medications, and this is also an issue that we have to take into account. That some international company will have a problem, and they will not be able to supply us. So this is, from our perspective, what will happen because of the cyber attack in Israel. I think that's. Two major issues that we are not developed enough. So one of them is the awareness of the, because mainly people still want, and the physicians still want to be, have to be open to the world all the time, by all means, and it's not possible that they can work for them. The perception is they cannot work. For example, it's still, we cannot input in the hospital, let's say that everybody has to use this kind of a card, to enter his computer. So this is something that's because they want very good access to the file. So this is something that we increase, and I think we have to work with the Israel Medical Association on the awareness of the physicians. And the other issue is the solution, the central solution, or technological solutions. I think we have still a way to go. This year, I think we will have to, and we're trying to convince also the Minister of Finance and others to invest more in development of technologies that will give some, as I mentioned earlier, central protection to the. It will have national. We would like to have national SOC and CERT in order to give central protection to the organizations in order to identify possible attacks and let them know on time and intervene. And of course, this sometimes happens on a daily basis. We identify them, but we're afraid of something that we will not be able to identify.
Thank you. So one final question before I'll give the stage for an audience question or two. We still have a couple of minutes. Dr. Matanya mentioned the balance between human life and human life in terms of investment. The balance between investing in cybersecurity in healthcare versus investments in other areas like medicine in the health basket or fresh equipment or any other kinds of investment. What's your opinion on this balance? Do you think cybersecurity should be treated differently, or should it be just one of many other investments supporting or important to save human lives?
I think that's the juggling that we do every day, trying to allocate resources. I mean, we're always in shortage. The blanket is very short, and it's not us, it's the whole system. It's not just the hospitals, it's the Kupot Cholim, it's everything. And do you want to put on patient safety more? Do you preventive? Infectious, like Professor Grotto said, takes a lot of money and a lot of resources, but is fully needed. So when you could say if you'll build bigger hospitals, bigger rooms, not packed, no crowded, no corridors, it will be better. So it's true, but it's a vicious cycle. But definitely we're spending a lot more on IT, and talking many millions, and it will just grow. So what is more important, it depends at the time, but it's definitely taking a larger chunk of our budget.
Thank you.
No, I agree that we do it on a regular basis even today. We have to decide about buying devices, paying money, and we do that. Whether we should allocate more money, probably yes. Depends on the budget that we have. Depends on the major needs. We have needs, as you mentioned. We have needs in medications, in devices, in upgrading the systems, in building new departments, in actually building even fixing the buildings which can fall on our patients. So there are many security problems that we have to take care of, and this comes along, and it becomes bigger and bigger, for sure. And it will become more and more. As we know, IT, just to buy an IT systems, it's a few $100 million for U.S. hospitals, at least, to start with. It's more than building 3 buildings or something like that. So it's a must, it's costly, and security is part of building the IT.
I guess if cybersecurity is looked at as a foundation or foundational component of digital health, which increases efficiency, etc., it might highlight it in a different manner. Any other?
Just regarding, you mentioned digital health, and we have got into a strategic decision in the Ministry of Health also to look at digital health as something strategic and not part of the IT as well. So this could be also, because there are also other issues. And because digital health is very much, a lot of investment is being put on this, and it's going to make a big change in the healthcare system, then it's, I think this, if we look on the optimistic comment, that this will also, if we put good regulations on the digital health and new developments, and when you invest in new technologies to also add and require that it will also be cyber safe, I think this is part of the solution.
Thank you. I know there's one question from the audience. I'll welcome a couple, so please.
Rafael from Tel Aviv University. All know about doctors' insurance. Perhaps it's time to introduce the concept of cyber liability.
In the medical profession, do you want to direct the question to anyone specific?
Government of Israel.
As a senior member of the, not the government, but the government office, I can say that I don't know exactly how to translate, but if, of course, let's say if something happens to a hospital or system or a patient because of a cyber attack, then of course I think this will be an issue also to, so someone could sue him. So this could be, of course, part of the insurance. Of course, since it's not a private system, it's mostly a public system. So most of the hospitals, they have some kind of general insurance which is not for a specific threat. So maybe I don't see it something new with new medical or a specific insurance for cyber for the hospital or for specific physician. There's some kind of general coverage which is not specific for specific threats.
Thank you. Please.
I just wanted to say that cyber insurance is preferable. I don't know why not. I have a question.
Please, sir.
It's hard for me to believe that Itamar, EHR, the big EHR companies don't focus on cybersecurity as a mainstay. Why isn't it built into their hundreds of millions of dollars systems? Or is it?
I'm sure it is, but the thing about the hackers is that what they do is they take whatever, I mean, all the systems that are being attacked usually have some kind of cybersecurity, but the thing is that they're smarter than everything else. You know, that's the escalator in this hacking thing. I'm sure they're putting a lot of money in the cybersecurity, and it is well secured until someone comes and cracks it.
Thank you. One final question, please.
I'm Dr. Milikovsky, President of the Alliance for Patient Safety. I'm going to share with you something very distressing. 3 of you received copy of several emails sent to the General Director of the Department of Health, Ministry of Health, regarding a new device, diagnostic device by T2 Biosystems, which was FDA approved recently to diagnose infections critical, fatal infections, hospital infections, within 3 hours instead of not at all or 3 days. There are more Israelis dying from infections and car accidents and all military conflicts and terrorism. To date, neither T2 Biosystem, neither myself have had any reaction. Only one physician from the private sector has said, wow, that's interesting, I'm going to look into it. I just spoke with Professor Gamzu, who recognized the fact that he received a copy. I even sent him a text message. Nobody is interested, apparently, to take any responsibility, take the bull by the horn, and cut down on infection rate. Seems to be that the whole healthcare system, and it's not just the government, because I copied most CEOs of hospitals and most leadership, including the president of the Israeli Medical Association, and many others in BCC. There seems to be a total bureaucratic paralysis. Nobody willing to take responsibility. No one seems to be able to take responsibility. Well, what's the problem?
Thank you, sir. Yes, please, Professor Beyar.
Well, I think we get all the time. We always evaluate new technologies favorably, whether it's a hospital infection or other types to treat patients. And we are willing to evaluate every new technology. And we check them by our experts and with the validity. And we are open to that. I think that I agree with you. Infection control is a major task of any medical systems in the world and in Israel as well. I think there's a lot of successes that have been obtained there over the last several years, but any new technology is very favorably looked at and considered by our experts. I don't know of anything that has been denied by definition. People have sometimes concerns about the efficiency. People want to see data that prove that the claim of a company about their product, but we look at everything favorably.
Thank you. Thanks, Professor Beyar. Last comments before we adjourn. Professor Eidelman?
Health system should be recognized as a critical infrastructure for cybersecurity. That's the biggest step that should be done. We have a lot of problems, infection and other problems, but we should take care of all the problems and not to say that because we have other problems, we don't take care of this one.
Thank you very much. Any other final comments?
I agree that totally with Professor Eidelman, except from the definition as, and you know, I don't disagree with you on that point on the infrastructure, on the essential infrastructure, critical infrastructure. We can maybe sit together and see that most of the things that are required, if you will decide that it is a critical infrastructure, then most of the things are being done in that direction. So I don't know it's an issue with the definition, but of course we should push to get more resources from the government on this point.
Thank you.